Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Children of Darkness and Light. I'm your host, Lori Hellis, also known as the Good Lori. And uh, welcome, all my friends. If I seem a little tired and a little slow today, it's because I am. So please forgive me. I hope you all had an amazing holiday, a wonderful Christmas. We sure did. Um, we were able to spend time. We were able to fly down to the LA area, leave very chilly Boise, Idaho, and fly down to the LA area and spend it with our daughter and her fiance and his family. We are some of the luckiest people on the planet because we have two kids who have found one another in this crazy world and also discovered that our families have meshed like we've always been families. So it's a huge blessing. We had a great time spending some time down there. It was, believe it or not, 80 degrees on Christmas Day. And got home last night, and here we are today. So, hello to everybody. I thought tonight we would just do a little bit of a recap of the year and really just take a lot of questions. Hello, or from High Desert Barb from Oregon. Hello from folks from Texas. And hello from, oh my goodness, Portland, Oregon. Welcome. Did I get my daughter's quilt finished? I did not. It's still in the background, still in a few squares. I did have one really exciting thing that I did while I was down there. For those of you who are people who sew or enjoy fashion, you'll know all about Mood fabrics. There is, if you've ever watched the design shows from New York, from Project Runway. They always go to Mood to buy their fabric. Well, there's one in LA, and I got to go to Mood, and I'm going to make my daughter's wedding veil, and so we went there and shopped for the supplies to make her veil, and so that was super exciting. I got to go to Mood. And otherwise, we had an amazing week with our family. It was so great to be with everybody. Now we're home, and I'm going to be hitting the ground running because we've got a trial coming up in April. Although we hope there won't be any more wrenches thrown in that. But we're going to talk a little bit about that, probably more on Friday when we actually talk about the Vallow-Daybell case in depth. Um, hello, T Diva from Minnesota. Heard it's pretty chilly there these days. And welcome to all who are joining us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for hopping on in this week after Christmas. And everybody's sort of catching their breath. I'm excited. My sister's flying in to visit this evening. And so we're all, I hope that you've all had the opportunity to enjoy your friends and your family and that you're all having planning for great New Year's. We have an awful lot coming up in the next few months, particularly if, as we expect, the Vallow-Daybell trial is going to start in April. So let's chat about what's happened this year. So much has happened this year, from the resolution of the Gabby Petito case with the death of Brian Laundrie and the discovery of his body in the swamp, to the discovery that and the arrests surrounding little Michael Vaughn from Fruitland, Idaho's. The arrests being made around his disappearance, to, of course, the Idaho College murders in Moscow. So a lot to talk about, a lot of cases that remain unresolved. Certainly we have Michael Vaughn, who his body has not been found. We have Harmony Montgomery, whose body has not been found. We have continue to have missing children who are being searched for, um, and we have a lot of cases that remain sort of hanging. So a lot of cases that we hope are going to find some resolution as we roll over into 2023. Um, we have not heard a great deal out of Moscow, Idaho, when it comes to the death of the 4 college students, and of course we have an arrest in Delphi after 6 years. And those 2 cases sort of, although they don't have a lot in common factually, it's important to remember that with the Delphi case, it took them 6 years to make an arrest. And it took them all of that time to build their case and to move forward with a prosecution. Don Carter, thank you so much for your super chat donation. And this girl as well. I'm sorry, but I have to get close to read the small print. Thank you so much, and Kathleen Smith. Thanks so much. All of your super chat donations go directly to our moderators. I want to thank you so much for supporting them. I think that we were able to do a little bit toward what is coming their way in time for Christmas, which was really helpful. And so we just have finally, it's interesting that it takes a while for YouTube to catch up, even after you get all enrolled and get everything all set up. It takes a little while for YouTube to catch up. So I do want to thank everybody. All of your super chats go to our moderators. I'm excited that in the next week or so, I'm going to be able to send each one of them a nice little post-Christmas bonus. And I appreciate so much every one of you that remembers them, and because I couldn't do this without them. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Brenda. And I'm hoping soon that we're going to be able to get those super chats out to them. And so I appreciate y'all sending them some coffee money or a little a cocktail, depending on their on what they like. And so I just want to thank you so much. Please, if you haven't, hit the like button and subscribe. We talk about all things legal because I am a retired criminal defense attorney. I actually retired both defense and prosecution at one point. So I have a little experience on both sides. And we talk about all things legal. So a lot of times when questions come up in cases and we think, why is that happening? Or what's happening legally in that case? I'm here to be your guide and translate those questions from legalese into English. So thanks so much for joining us. Please subscribe. Please like. It does help us in the YouTube algorithm. I want to thank all of you. We have nearly 5,000 subscribers, which is huge. I thought I was doing great when we had 500. So I want to thank all of you for joining us every Wednesday and Friday to continue on to talk about the legal issues. We also have the True Crime Quilt Guild coming up. For those of you who haven't been around before, I'm a quilter, and I have pulled out all my quilting goodies because we're going to do a block of the month quilt club beginning in mid-January. So we are going to be starting that. I've got some instructional videos to to get ready for you all so that we can start together. If you have never quilted before, this is an appropriate beginner's project. We're going to be learning how to quilt as we go along and make these squares. I've taught quilting before and I love it, so I think it's going to be great fun. And you can join us. I will make sure that we put the links and all of the information in the show notes so that you can quilt along with us. Also, I write a weekly or periodic, let's put it that way, newsletter that comes out when there have been developments in the case. That newsletter can be found at theloriVallowstory.com, and you can find the references to the Quilt Guild on that website as well. My webmaster is working on an overhaul, so pretty soon it's going to have its own page for all of our quilting Quilt Guild information and links. So thank you so much, Hazelnut. Happy holidays to you too, and to our amazing mods. Thank you for your donation. I appreciate it so much because our mods are amazing. Sarah Adams says you must have extraordinary patience, Ms. Hellis. I don't know what that applies to, whether it's the quilting or whether it's being a lawyer and having to put up with all these delays. It is interesting that today there were some documents filed in the Vallow-Daybell case having to do with John Pryor asking for more time. Once again, we're going to talk in depth about that on Friday, on our Friday show, when we talk about all things Vallow-Daybell. But it is interesting that he is having trouble hiring a mitigation specialist. He is having trouble moving forward, and it's unfortunate, but not unexpected. Knowing that he is retained, that he is not receiving support from the state of Idaho when it comes to hiring experts and hiring a defense team, means that he's really at a disadvantage. I'm concerned that he is continuing to press forward. Now would have been a really good time for him before the last trial setting was set in April. I'm sorry if I seem a little scattered tonight. I am. It's been a busy week and I'm still catching up. But what I meant to say was, before the court set this last April trial, I think would have been the appropriate time for him to notify the court that he was unable to meet the needs of his client. Now that the court has set this April trial date, I suspect that the judge is not going to have a lot of sympathy for him when it comes to him saying, I can't be ready. I would be very surprised at this point if the judge were to move that April 3rd trial beginning. The Judge Boyce was not happy about moving it last time, particularly because of the level of coordination it takes with Ada County, because that's where the trial's going to be. So I think that I don't think that he is going to allow any more continuances. I think we're going to see a trial start in April. I could be wrong, but that is my reading of the tea leaves at this point. So I think what we'll do at this point is just open it up to questions. I know that that everybody's got a lot of questions about cases that are developing or cases that have resolved this year. And so I think we'll just start there. Oh, Claire, this is a great question, and I'm really glad you asked this. Claire's question is, what are my thoughts on the lawsuit involving the professor and the TikTok person? So for those of you who haven't heard about this, which is it'd be hard, but it's been a busy holiday and a lot of people have been unplugged. Um, there is a TikTok personality who claims that she is a psychic, and she has identified a female professor from Moscow, Idaho, as the person who she believes is responsible for the deaths of the four college students. And it's absolutely horrific. This woman has been harassed, and she's been accused of having a romantic relationship with one of the students. Has been falsely accused. I mean, from the beginning, she said, "I wasn't even in Boise. I was, or in Moscow. I was in Seattle with my husband." She is in no way involved, but this TikTok person has just continued to double down, and they sent her cease and desist letters saying, you're defaming me and you need to stop. And unfortunately, she just doubled down. So the professor has filed a defamation lawsuit against this TikTok producer. I think it raises a number of really interesting legal questions. So talking a little bit about defamation, slander, libel, defamation, all truth is an absolute defense. So if you say something and it's true, then it's not slander, not defamation. But it's clear in this case that what this person is saying is absolutely not true. And it's very clear that this person is very irresponsibly using TikTok as a vehicle for her questionable psychic abilities. What's what's interesting, I think, is this overlay. Many people, one of the defenses, it for a defamation would be that the person they're talking about is a public figure. So, for instance, it is a much higher bar for a person to sue someone who's a public figure, a political figure, a movie star. It's a much higher standard to sue, for that person to sue for defamation. Because the thinking is, you've put yourself out there in the public, you are a public figure, you have to expect a certain amount of stuff coming back at you. So I think the interesting question is, where in that fine line does a person step over and no longer be a public figure, or become a public figure if you happen to be like me doing YouTube videos? I would submit that I'm kind of in that gray area, because we have 5,000 followers. So am I a public figure? I'm putting myself out there, but or am I still a private citizen? So I think it is an interesting question, and it will be interesting to see how it's resolved. I fully expect that a judge is going to find on behalf of the college professor and against the TikTok producer. The unfortunate part about it is the TikTok producer probably has very little in the way of assets, and defamation is all about receiving money in return for restoring reputation, to whatever extent that's possible. Did the judge admit being in Facebook group yet? / how are your motions, good Lori? Thank you. Oh, there's the word / in there. I happen to know that I want to pronounce your name right. Iriska? I happen to know that she's visually impaired and that she dictates her questions. So every once in a while, we get a random bit of punctuation in there. Thank you for asking. The judge has not admitted being in a Facebook group yet, and in fact has not um, unsealed any of those documents that have to do with those allegations. So there's no way for us to know at this point whether he's ever going to unseal those documents. What I will say is that, sorry, I was getting rid of something on the other screen. What I will say is that once the trial is over, he can't keep those documents sealed indefinitely. And that will be very interesting to see what impact that has. And thanks for your good wishes. Happy holidays to you too. The judge has ordered that some of the documents that I had asked about or I had filed motions about be unsealed, but not a lot of them. So he sort of did a little, I don't know, unsealing sort of to maybe prove that he was not sealing them for nefarious reasons. So we'll see. Once the trial is over and all of the documents are unsealed, we'll see. We'll find out what's in them. And I'm sure that there are many folks who are going to be really interested in that. Thank you, The Reels. Thank you so much for your donation to our moderators. Can Pryor say, I want the state to pay for experts, but I want to stay on the case, or is it all or nothing? Good question. You know, it really depends on the state. There are some states where retained defense attorneys can ask the assistance of the state without having to leave the case. And I'm not sure in Idaho whether that's an option. It doesn't appear to be because the court appointed Jim Archibald and allowed Mark Means to stay on, but essentially declared that Lori was indigent and appointed Jim Archibald way back earlier this year. So the answer is I'm not 100% positive, but it doesn't appear that way. I will look into that and find out. Because at this point, Pryor, it seems to me that if it were possible, Pryor would have already requested experts and mitigation specialist and a second attorney and all those things. But he has not been able to do that. So it's very concerning that he's continuing to say, I'm not ready. I can't hire anybody. Hey, Sarah, Michelle, if you can you ask the good Lori what kind of crap the bad Lori is trying to do, the card she's trying to play? You know, I think that the biggest card that she was trying to play is her competence. And I think that is absolutely going to come up as we go forward, even though Idaho does not have the death penalty. I mean, does not have, okay, here we go. Even though Idaho does not have the insanity defense, they do have the death penalty. I think that it is possible that even though they don't have the insanity defense, there is an argument that my client is so impaired that she couldn't form the mental state, she couldn't form the intent to commit the crime. So I think that's probably where her attorneys are going. And in order to do that, they need to present evidence that she is seriously mentally ill and has been for a long time. They are going to have to go back and work to present evidence that her mental state was rapidly deteriorating before she met Chad. She was already decompensating. She was already deeply involved in all of this doomsday stuff, but that it was Chad's teachings and his influence that tipped her over into this murderous plot. So I think their tactic is going to be to continue to play with she wasn't competent to form the intent, that she was already seriously mentally ill, that it would have never happened had it not been for the perfect storm of her meeting Chad and his influence. And I think the most interesting thing at this point is that what we're seeing is him saying, I was taken in by the femme fatale, and him, that Chad's position being, I was just completely taken by this beautiful woman, and I was taken in by the femme fatale, and her position being he was the prophet, the Svengali who overpowered my will because of my mental illness. So I think it will be really interesting to see what that looks like when they get to trial. Is it one throwing the other under the bus? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think you're going to definitely see a lot of that finger pointing happen. So, have you been able to read the new press release that Moscow police released today? If you could you break it down for us? I did read it, and I didn't see that it had a tremendous amount of new information in it. I I do think the Moscow police are trying really hard to manage expectations. They're trying really hard to sort of tamp down a lot of the internet furor that's going on. I do believe that they're beginning to suggest that they have at least some ideas about who this perpetrator might be. I think they're starting to drop little hints to that, but I think they are also trying to really avoid the the stuff like what we have seen happen with the college professor. Some really outrageous people jumping to some really outrageous conclusions that with no basis. So I think they're walking a really fine line. I understand that there are a lot of people who feel like they could have been on top of things faster. I think it's important to remember that we all are conditioned by television that crimes get solved quickly. We hear about, the magic hour, the first 48, how important those things are. And they are important. It is critically important to gather that information during that time. But the analysis of that information can take months, weeks, months, even years. So we know that in many instances, in cases that have been resolved years later, sometimes it's evidence that turns up later, such as someone who is not in a DNA database, suddenly their DNA becomes available in a database. They've had a run-in with law enforcement and now their DNA is in the database. Or they've done 23andMe and now suddenly we have these genealogical researchers who are mining that information. So super important that we exercise a little bit of patience and allow the law enforcement folks to do their job. I believe that the Idaho murders will be solved, and I believe that it will be done fairly soon. I don't think we're going to see a situation like Delphi where it's going to take 6 years. It is interesting that that it actually was an administrative error that may have contributed to the length of time that it took to solve Delphi. Because of the misfiling of an interview with the prime suspect. And because my brain is really tired tonight, I can't think of his name, Richard. Because he was interviewed by the FBI fairly soon after the murders happened, and that interview was misfiled. So Delphi might have been solved much earlier had it not been for that clerical error. But I think that Moscow murders are going to be Moscow. I'm trying to be respectful. I think the Moscow murders are going to be solved sooner rather than later. So, can Pryor say, "I want the state to pay for experts"? Oh, we've had that. Um, could Chad get an appeal because of ineffective representation by John Pryor? Every defendant who goes forward with an appeal is going to appeal. One of the issues for appeal is going to be ineffective assistance of counsel. It's just one of those standard things they appeal. But the legal standard, excuse me, the legal standard for ineffective assistance of counsel is very low. And it's kind of hard to make that argument because the legal standard is you have to be able to prove that had it not been for your ineffective counsel, there would have been a different outcome in the trial. So, for example, Jodi Arias filed an appeal and said, I had ineffective assistance of counsel. And the appeals court in Arizona said, oh, no, it doesn't really matter how bad your attorney was unless you can prove that the outcome would have been different if you'd had a different lawyer. Well, the proof was the proof, regardless of whether her attorney raised every possible appellate issue and every possible objection. The outcome was still the same. There was sufficient evidence for the jury to find her guilty, regardless of the operation of her legal counsel or her team. So it's a really hard standard to meet because you have to be able to prove that but for your lawyer's ineffectiveness, the outcome would have been different. So that's hard. It's a hard standard to meet. And so, there are very famous cases from the 60s and 70s where attorneys down in the South either in one case was a person who was right out of law school, had never tried a jury trial before and ended up in a murder case. And the judge said, it wouldn't have changed the outcome if you'd had F. Lee Bailey. The outcome was the outcome because the evidence proved your guilt regardless of your attorney. Similarly, there was a case where an attorney slept through an entire the bulk of a trial, and the judge still said no harm, no foul, because there was sufficient evidence to find you guilty. What is this? No, Jodi, you had a gun and a knife. Oh, yeah. Well, that was the point. Does Lori have to agree to her defense, or can Archibald just put forth what is in her best interest? This is a really good question. Wondering if her reluctance to agree with the defense strategy is part concern about competence. This is both really good questions, two parts to a really good question. Lori's lawyers are ethically obligated not to put forward a defense that is not supported by fact. Now, we had a question a while back about a fellow whose name escapes me, who was complaining that his attorneys had lied to him because they had told him, according to him, that they were going to present a defense that he felt justified the murder. It appeared that it was going to be a self-defense argument, although they never really said it. And the attorney said, we have presented a case based on all the competent evidence, meaning all of the evidence that is provable and believable. So the lawyer's job is absolutely not to put on evidence that is not true or not competent and provable. But on the other side, they're ethically obligated to not present things that their client says they don't want. For example, if Idaho were a state that allows um, the insanity defense, if a client were to say, I do not want to make the insanity defense, although I understand why you think I should, the lawyer cannot then say, I want to present an insanity defense. Now, the lawyer may be able, and this is to the second part of the conversation, the question, the lawyer may be able to say to the judge, Judge, I have some serious concerns about the level of my client's competence, whether my client is able to aid and assist in their defense. So remember that insanity is about what happened at the time the crime was committed. Competence is about the person's ability to go forward with the case now. So it could be that Lori's attorneys could say to the judge, we believe that this is that this argument that she was unable to form the intent to commit the crime because of her mental health issues is a reasonable strategy and is supported by competent evidence. The fact that our client doesn't want us to put forward that argument makes us worry about her competence. And now we would like to have her evaluated for competence. I think the competence issue is going to be harder for them to go forward with because of the most recent evaluations. They raised that issue. She was evaluated. It appears that she was evaluated by someone who's very well known for evaluations of this kind, was involved in the evaluation that proved malingering for the Elizabeth Smart case. So there's a lot kind of going on behind the scenes with Lori's competence. I am not convinced that they're going to be able to continue to ring that bell, but she does have to agree to the defense strategy. If she says, I do not want that brought up, I do not want that to be our argument, I don't believe it's true, I don't believe that I'm incompetent, I don't believe I was incompetent then, and I don't want people thinking I'm crazy, which is often what defendants say, then they cannot go forward with that argument. So, good question. My goodness, Teresa Terrell, thank you. You're an awesome blend of intelligence and artsy talent. That is me. Well, I am completely enjoying my retirement and my ability to exercise the creative half of my brain. I will say that when I practiced law, having creative outlets was very important to me because a lot of what I did was hard information, hard work, and so I think in the grand scheme of things, that was what kept me sane, was doing more creative approach or endeavors. Um, so I think we've answered this question about the Moscow police release. And can the landlord or rental company of the Moscow? Oh, okay. Can the landlord or the rental company of the Moscow, Idaho apartment where the murders took place be held liable for not disclosing that it's a party house for years? Not really. Would not affect how the case if it goes to trial. let's face it, this was student housing. In fact, when I look at the exterior of the house, when I look at the diagram of the floor plan, it is eerily similar to student housing that my daughter lived in. And I'm sure that anybody else out there who's got college students thinks, yeah, I've seen this place before. It's very typical for student housing. That said, it is also very typical for students in student housing to party. I don't know that there's been any indication that this was any more or less of a party house than any of the others. The girls were involved in sororities. The Evan, the one boy that was murdered, was involved in a fraternity. Those are always organizations that I won't say encourage, but that lead to kids partying. Um, they were older. Some of them were 21, some were 20. And all of those things sort of contribute to young people partying. Um, I don't know that the landlord has any particular responsibility for that house being a party house or not being a party house. They have rules. How well they enforce those rules, how enforceable they legally enforceable they are, varies. And so I don't know that arguing that this was a party house and had it not been a party house, somebody wouldn't have gone in there and murdered everybody. I don't know where that if that gets anybody anywhere. So I would say not. I would say that it probably is unlikely that property is going to be rented again, and the owner is certainly going to have a big financial hit by the fact that property is unlikely to be rentable again. Um, student populations have long memories, and I cannot imagine that any student's going to want to live in that apartment. So, any opinion on the recently released Melanie's interviews? Not really, because I'd seen them before. It's not new information. I think somebody just kind of mined it a little bit, but I didn't. It wasn't really any new information on from this would be Melanie Boudreau Pulaski. Um, as we've talked about before, I think that she and Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis all have immunity deals, either formal or informal. We saw Melanie Boudreau Pulowski, Melanice, as we've been calling her, because she is Lori Vallow's niece. I think that we've seen we saw her be charged with some identity theft charges that were had to do with her ex-husband and getting into his bank account. She was charged with those. The charges were dismissed within a few days. I think that was purely to get leverage on her so that she would testify. The same with Melanie Gibb. With Melanie Gibb, we saw Mark Means earlier this year, early in the case, serve her with a discovery demand, and her first response was call Rob Wood, which tells me she's got a deal. So, Sarah Adams says Melanie Gibbs says that she does not responsible for the validity of that, but I've heard her make that proclamation. I also know that she made that proclamation, but I think it would be interesting to look at the timing of when she said that versus whether she would say it now, because I think I definitely think that after the grand jury was convened and she testified after the indictments came down, then I think she might sing a different story. So, um, Archibald seems to be an experienced death penalty lawyer. Do I know anything about John Thomas? They are both experienced death penalty lawyers. Both of them have been lead counsel on death penalty cases, and they are both certified by the state of Idaho. So it's interesting. If you or I decide to go out and retain an attorney, it is our responsibility to hire someone who we believe is qualified. That's why John Pryor, who has never tried a death penalty case, is representing Chad, because he is privately retained. However, if you are appointed a state appointed attorney, the state sets guidelines that the lawyer must meet, qualifications that the lawyer must meet before they are appointed. So typically what happens is court appointed attorneys start by taking misdemeanor cases, lower complexity cases. They're required to do so many of those trials before they are elevated felonies. They're required to do so many felony trials before they're elevated to more complex felonies and to death penalty work. They're required to have sat as a second chair, as the second attorney in at least one death penalty case. And they're required to do some special continuing legal education having to do with mitigation and some of those other covering some of those other issues. So John Thomas is independently death penalty certified, and so she has two death penalty certified attorneys who are working on her case. Jim Archibald is the head of the local public defender group, and he's extremely experienced and has done many death penalty cases. I don't have an exact number, but I know that he's done quite a few. Oh, what is Attorney Rachel's role going to be in this case on Rob Wood's team? That is a really good question, and I'm not really sure we know. We've seen her take a little bit more active role in argument in court at the last hearing. She argued one of the motions. So we are seeing her take a little bit more of a front row kind of a role. Initially, I think she was doing a lot of advising behind the scenes of sort of the legal ins and outs of death penalty prosecutions. So how the indictments are written, how the charges are structured based on Idaho law. So, but it does appear that she's taking a little bit more of a front seat and actually arguing some of the motions in court. What that says about her role, it's clear that she will not be the lead prosecutor on the case. Lindsay Blake, it's her county, and she will continue to be the lead prosecutor with Wood and Smith backing her up. Rob Wood tends to take a pretty aggressive role, a pretty assertive kind of a role, but ultimately the case belongs to the Fremont County DA's office. So we're kind of crawling up, kind of edging up toward the hour. There's 273 of you along for the ride. Please remember that all of our super chats go directly to our moderators. And thank you, as always, to our moderators, Brenda and Michelle. Michelle is usually on StreamYard and posts our questions. And Brenda is usually watching the interface into YouTube, which is where you all see it, and catching questions in chat as we go along. Please, please, please hit that like button. And I want to just say a few things. I appreciate all of your support. I appreciate all of your kind words. The comments that come in through YouTube are amazing, humbling, and I appreciate, and I read every one of them. I do want you to know that I do go back and I read all of the comments that come in through YouTube. I read all of the chat entries, although I don't usually try. I try not to read them while I'm talking to you all, because it's getting harder to walk and chew gum at the same time. And especially as the day goes on, it gets later in the evening. So I appreciate your patience when I feel a little bit scattered. I appreciate so much that you all spend time here with me. I find that amazing and humbling, and I want to keep doing it. We have some really great things coming up in the future that I just want to talk a little bit more about. Next month, we're going to start this quilt block of the month stuff. And for anybody who'd like to quilt along with us or learn, we're going to all do it together, and we're going to share at the end of this what we've made together. I also want to remind everybody that once the trial starts, this schedule is going to change. I will be attending the trial every day, and I will be posting YouTube shorts during the lunch period to catch everybody up on what happened in court, and then afterwards as well. And then probably on Saturday, we will do a full-length recap of what's going on in the trial. So things are going to change once the trial starts, and I hope you'll all stay with me. We don't know at this point whether Judge Boyce is going to change his mind about cameras in the courtroom. If not, I'm going to be there taking furious notes and keeping everybody up to date as we go along on what's happening, and I'll be there every day. If by chance the judge does allow cameras in the courtroom, or in some limited way, then I'll still be there to weigh in on all the legal issues and answer legal questions. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you had an amazing Christmas. I want to wish you a very happy new year, and stick with us in 2023, because it is going to be a Lulu. We have so much to get ready for, so much to look forward to, and so much fun coming up. We have the posts happening now about how to download the pattern for our quilt guild. Those have been pinned and posted. We'll continue to get that information out to you. Look for some new videos coming out, about some pre-recorded videos coming out for instruction. And I will see you all on Friday, when we will dig deeper into some new documents that are coming out in the Vallow-Daybell case. And I hope that we will see you all here on Friday. So I'm going to say good night, and we'll see you on Friday.